So as we know, the Human Resource Development Strategy, 2030 strategy, it is a mandate from heads of government, and it was endorsed in 2017, and actually it was developed against the backdrop that there were deficiencies and gaps in the education system, and then it was to address these gaps and also in an effort to respond to the UN Sustainable Development Goals 2030. Since the inception of this strategy, we have made some progress. We have made quite a bit of progress, but as you would realize, there were different priorities. There were 4 main priorities in the strategy as it relates to access, equity, quality, and relevance, and that was across both the basic education, tertiary education, and skills for lifelong learning. And you would realize that there were a lot of elements included in this strategy that needed to move forward. And one such activity would be the implementation plan. So we have been meeting at different levels. There have been several consultations with key stakeholders on important conditions and situations that would help to accelerate the implementation of the plan. And yesterday, the 38th Council meeting on the Council for Human and Social Development was convened here in the Secretariat, and it was a good time that we could have submitted these areas that we thought would have assisted in propelling or accelerating the efforts on implementation. And I must say, from deliberations for the 2 days, we had around 17 items submitted for the consideration of the Ministers of Education. And we had very robust discussions, and I will just refer to some of the main areas that were highlighted. One of the main highlights is that we had a baseline report submitted to the heads on the key indicators to address both the access, the 4 priorities that I alluded to before: access, relevance, equity, quality, in reference to both basic education, skills for lifelong learning, and tertiary education. They also provided, it was against a survey that was conducted in member states to identify the status of member states on their readiness to respond to key indicators, especially as it relates to monitoring and evaluation. So we had the findings. The findings were submitted and discussed, and in reference to the access, relevance, quality, and equality, the ministers had the opportunity to discuss and determine whether the targets that were set for the region, whether they were feasible, whether they were achievable. So we had a lot of discussions, very good discussions on that, and they gave the guidance as to what they thought at this time would have been achievable. Another key area that was discussed is a proposal that was submitted as it relates to the costing of the plan. We would realize that we have a very ambitious plan, and this plan has to be rolled out up to 2030, and every aspect of the plan would require some kind of costing. So we had a presentation of options as it relates to costing the plan, because this plan, as I said, it's very ambitious. We have about 41 key objectives that we would want to ensure that we meet, and to them we have over, I think, 71 outputs, and these outputs would have to be costed. And when we look at the implementation of the plan, we know that planning in itself would be a key component, so that had to be planned. So every output a costing was added to it, and then there were also 4 recommendations provided to member states, to the ministers, so they could decide whether at member state level they would seek to find the funds to ensure the implementation, whether they would seek funding outside of the member states, and the other options that they could choose. So they had at least 4 of them that they could choose. We also discussed the quality standards for teaching, because we realized that while we might place quite a bit of emphasis on students, but we want to make sure that our educators, our administrators, they too have the requisite competencies to teach the students. So that in itself too generated a lot of debate, and we had very robust discussions and good decisions coming out of this. And one of the things that I think I would really want to speak to also is that when we think of children, because we are talking about education, then you can't leave out the students, and then we think going forward to 2030, the challenges of the 2030s will be different than what we are facing now, and then we would have to kind of reconsider conceptualizing how we deal with the children of 2030. So there's a new school model that was proposed, and ministers again could have looked at the different dimensions of that model and give advice and give the decision as to whether it can be adopted. We also looked at the issues of crime and violence, which is also affecting our students. So we had findings on various aspects of crime and violence, and another aspect for relating to the children was that of the revised curriculum and family health and family life education. Again, we had to relook at our curriculum because we wanted to be sure that we were reaching the students, especially with our current issues of obesity, the current issues of communicable diseases on a whole, starting off much earlier now than it used to before. That focus was actually taken into consideration in the revised curriculum. So there's a lot of emphasis on the whole child, not just making sure that the child has knowledge, that the child can get out of school with how many subjects, but the child can actually be healthy, because you realize that if your health is compromised as a child, most of the time it transitions to your adulthood. And I think in this we will be addressing the whole issue of chronic non-communicable diseases. So I must say it was very informative, and I think, again, looking back at the theme for the meeting, which was moving from aspiration to action, I think quite a bit of action, not just action, but proactive steps were taken to address the key issues that we think will propel and accelerate the implementation of the strategy.